All right.
We're live from Saturday night.
Hey, Daniel. I'm trying to find out more about FFTV, the final podcast that's all about Final Fantasy and everything related to it. If it's all about Final Fantasy and everything related to it, when are you gonna have me on, man? I'm just saying. Avalanche might need you, but I'm wondering if FFTV needs Barrett. Much love, man.
What is going on, everyone? This is FFTV, and you are watching currently on FFTV Final Podcast. Now, Final Podcast is the Final Fantasy podcast. Basically, you heard from Barrett, you heard him from the man himself, and all things related to it. So each Final Fantasy, or I'm sorry, each Final Podcast will be numbered as in the Roman numerals, just like our beloved franchise. So this is Final Fantasy. I'm so sorry. This is our first time. This is Final Podcast I. Next week will be II. You get it. All right. So it's a four-man party tonight. We have Osby Tomlin in the top right. We have Vinny McGovern in the bottom right, and Reed Daniels in the bottom left. I am Cloud Strife. I'm Daniel Huffledge, and we're going to get this thing underway. Now, first of all, I have a very special message for you. If you're tuning into this right now, then you are starting a new game with us. This is the very first video on this channel, and we encourage you to join in on this conversation. We want to hear from you. We will engage with you in the comments. This is fun. This is going to be a community type thing. So let's join in. Let's add to the conversation in the comments below. And what better way to get to know each other than to talk about our favorite Final Fantasy? Yeah, this is going to be a fun one that you get to know about us and our favorite Final Fantasy. Now, I'm assuming, because I met a lot of these guys through a particular Final Fantasy numbered game group. Yeah. So I think
about that.
I think we'll talk about that later. But for the sake of diversity in our answers, I think we'll have a really fun and interesting conversation for you guys. And I will start it off so that way you guys kind of get the idea of what we're going with. But before I do so, what's up, Osby? How you doing, man?
Oh man, I'm doing great. I'm up here in the corner living my best life, up top. Sorry guys down below, you know what I'm saying? But no, things are good. My name is Osby Tomlin. I've been playing video games for a very long time, and Final Fantasy VII was the first one, and I just love all these games, man. I do some JRPGs on the side of the whole JRPG thing. I'm a retired professional wrestler. I used to beat up people wearing tights. It was totally scripted. I have a toddler, and 9 concussions are fun. So if I repeat myself, I totally don't know I'm doing it.
Oh man, I don't know if I should laugh at that or
that
not.
grin really sealed it.
And then in the bottom right, Vinny McGovern. How you doing, man? You are a talking sword.
Yes, actually, I am. I'm my favorite sword of the franchise. Actually, I'm doing pretty well. So yeah, I mean, Final Fantasy was actually the first video game I've ever played. I didn't before I even knew it was a Final Fantasy. I had no idea what any video games were. Really, I just played with my uncle a lot. And my uncle's probably the one who actually got me into video games, and now I'm obsessed with RPGs. I play anything between JRPGs, Western RPGs. I am a firefighter medic, which means I basically get paid to play video games when there's nothing going on. So it's actually really, really great. Yeah, I get paid to eat, sleep, and play video games, and also do fire stuff.
And
sometimes.
also be a good person, and save lives, like
you don't gotta lie to the people.
All right, Reed Daniels below me right now. Below me right now. Reed Daniels, what's up?
Yeah, I was about to say.
Hey now,
That was the G rating.
We're live. We're live.
rated T for T.
What's up, Reed Daniels? How are you doing today, man? Tell us about yourself.
I'm fantastic. Thank you for having me. What's actually funny is Daniel's never played an RPG in his life. We just Googled handsome host because we needed one, and it's what we got. Look at this poster boy right here. Long time friends.
What are
of Daniel.
video games?
Long time JRPG fan, and my first JRPG was Phantasy Star on Sega Genesis, way back in the day. I played them all, and this is a Final Fantasy here, but I'm gonna go ahead and throw a shout out to Breath of Fire and Suikoden series for being incredible as well. I mean, yeah, just name drop, right?
Yeah,
I got famous friends.
Not Barrett Wallace though. It's not John Eric Bentley.
Not yet. We haven't wooed him yet. You heard him talk. Like he's just dying to meet me.
He is.
Will they get load of mean? That's all I got. Sorry.
All right, cool, man. Well, I am Daniel Hofflich, and a little bit about myself, which I'm going to explain what my favorite Final Fantasy here is in a minute, because that is my favorite Final Fantasy, or not only my favorite Final Fantasy, but my favorite video game of all time is Final Fantasy VII. I'll just go ahead and get that out of the way. There it is. But also, I mean, I just love all games. I'm a host of another podcast with Game Night. You can find that on youtube.com/Game Night Hype. And yeah, so I just love podcasting, and I'm glad to be back at doing it again. Recently had our daughter, and the schedule just kind of like,
congrats.
Yeah, thank you. The schedule kind of got a little bit hard to plan around. So I'm grateful that my wife has taken the kids today, so I can I can do this. And yeah, so I just really enjoy talking about games. What better like franchise to talk about than my favorite franchise of all time? So I'm excited about that. So there, I'll get right into it for you guys. Final Fantasy VII, my favorite Final Fantasy of all time. There it is. Love that sweet box art there. But yeah, so like Final Fantasy VII. So I'll start at the beginning. All right. So I was 7 years old when that game came out.
The irony.
Right. Yeah. 1997. Final Fantasy VII. I was 7. So I wasn't allowed to play that game. It was rated teen, and my parents did not allow me to play rated teen games. My older brother Sean played the crap out of it. So I would actually sneak downstairs and like kind of like hide behind the couch and try to watch him play it. He finally, when I was behind the couch, like watching him play it, the scene that I saw was the blood trail going through it, and I was like, oh my god! And then like when you peek through the that little where you saw Jenova
thing,
yeah, and like that, like I was like, oh my god, that was what? This is crazy. It was blowing my mind. And then finally, Sean knew I was back there, so he finally convinced my mom to let me watch him play it, and then convinced her to let me play the game. And my young just immature mind, it wasn't fully grown, but man, it really had an impact on me, and it basically became like the seeds to my imagination. Like my imagination basically is rooted in Final Fantasy VII. So everything from like the way I would like act out like stories in my head, everything from there, I got into writing from Final Fantasy VII. I got into playing video games hardcore from Final Fantasy VII. Yeah, so everything just roots right back to Final Fantasy VII, and that's how much of an impact it had on me personally. But not only that, it had an even more personal impact on me too. When my older brother Sean, he got cancer, and basically when he passed away from it, Final Fantasy VII kind of became that bridge to like connect with him. So every year when I play Final Fantasy VII, I feel like I'm connected to him. And I guess the unique thing about Final Fantasy VII is that it is about life and death. So the themes of Seven, I in a way, I guess it wouldn't be unreasonable to say, prepared me somewhat for like life and death. And yeah,
Sector 7 plate. That's all you need to know.
well, that and
If
of
that
course,
if that doesn't mature you 10 years, nothing will. I still like the
Right.
first time I played through that, man. It's like, all right, so that's what mortality is. Okay, I'm 8 years old, but now I know what life is.
honestly though, the wild thing about that is I didn't like fully comprehend what that was. You know what I mean? Like when the plate dropped, I just thought it was a really cool CGI moment.
Dude,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
and
I was like,
now,
whoa.
now that we're older,
You know?
Where'd all
the
these people
craziest
go,
thing-
man?
Yeah,
The
and you're just like, oh
craziest
my
thing-
god.
the
I
craziest
love
thing
that
about
about
Final Fantasy
remake
VII
when
now-
when remake really focused on like they really focused on the impact of that plate dropping, and not only that, the impact of the bombing of reactor 1. Like that was cool. But it was
And the
it was
physical
obviously
impact of it actually hitting.
yeah, man. But obviously it was Aerith's death that like that was the meaningful death.
It's the most
that,
iconic moment in gaming history,
It's-
in my
exactly.
opinion.
And it's
So,
how
yeah,
it's how the
without
characters
doubt.
handled that is like really what stuck with me. And like how the characters how Cloud handles it,
What's
so-
funny, it's funny you mention that because like the whole game, you know how Cloud's like almost like mechanical in the way he is. He's so cool and calm.
Yes.
I think it's Aerith's death where it's like you actually see him connect to his humanity because he's like, my arms are shaking, my eyes are twitching. It's like
Yeah.
I think it's almost like he's feeling his own body for like the first time
Mhm.
because like, he's been living like as Zack this whole time.
Mhm.
And I think it's like Aerith's death. I think where it's almost like he feels himself for the first time, not in a weird way, but you know what I'm saying,
right. Right. I mean,
Yeah,
goosebumps, bro.
he's like, well, this is a good time to say.
I had goosebumps until you said that.
Man, what's bad is as an 8-year-old playing that game after Aerith died and then going back to Midgar and walking into that church and briefly seeing Ghost
Oh,
Aerith in the
God,
back.
yeah.
Dude, that messed me up. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is
Because like
not
your
good.
mind, you're like, oh, that's a glitch.
Advent Children, where they show the church and it's like her and Zack. Well, you know what's funny about that though? It's like, and maybe this is jumping ahead of where we're discussion's going, but like when it just shows them together in the church walking together, it's almost like, okay, so Aerith and Zack are reunited. So it's like, are they like, so whose arc is really completing?
That's it.
Is it Cloud's closure
Mhm.
of them being together, and then he's gonna end up being with Tifa, which is like, everyone's questions. So.
I would love to have an entire episode based on that because I have a lot of thoughts. I am personally to the
Hold the
point.
thoughts.
It's Cloud and Tifa, Zack and Aerith, and I have thoughts of why.
Yes, I agree.
And yeah, let's save that for another one. That's
Yep.
gonna be a fun one because I feel like we have a
Yeah.
good conversation there.
It's a great lead in.
Well, actually,
You're not
you
gonna
got-
you
ship
gotta leave
this,
him wanting
man.
more.
You're not gonna ship
gotta-
this, man.
You gotta ship.
What's that? What's that,
Oh.
Vinny?
depending on what cutscene you get, it could be Cloud and Barrett's closure.
Right, yeah.
I don't really know.
I mean, this is 2020, man. We're progressive here.
Cloud and Bear.
This is an
John,
all-inclusive
you heard it.
channel.
If you're listening to this, I can't wait for the carnival or the
Gold
golden
saucer.
Oh my god.
the gold
Oh my
saucer
god. It'd be
date.
an incredible question for him. Like, what's your ideal date with Cloud?
What's your idea? There you go.
That'd
Prepare
be-
your answers now, John.
Do you like
Yeah.
Ferris wheels?
Do you- yeah, so like I mean that's it, man. So that it is Final Fantasy VII is a very personal game for me, not only with all that deep personal connection to it, but like it's just an incredible game packed with like so much story, so much just character development, and every character has meaning, and it's just the villain iconic. It's just I play that game at least. I try to play it once a year.
Yep.
Yeah. So, so that's me. That's my favorite Final Fantasy Final Fantasy.
That's my favorite.
That's my
Final
favorite
Fantasy
Final
VII.
Fantasy VII. It is my favorite Final Fantasy VII, by the way, as well. I'll go ahead and throw that in there with remake and everything in the compilation. But Osby, what's up,
Yes.
man?
I
What's your
mean,
favorite Final
so this is how I was also going to do this. Probably everyone on this podcast was going to do
Look
this.
at this man.
But I mean, like, since I'm not going to do this, I'll give you a little backstory with that Final Fantasy VII, and then I'm going to segue into 9 because
Hey.
9 it's pretty good too. Final Fantasy VII was the first game I got on PlayStation, and I had the wonderful luxury of not owning a memory card. Can you imagine starting Final Fantasy VII every day when you got off school? Over and over and over and over. I probably ran that bombing mission 40
Oh
or
my
50
God.
times before I was able to get a memory card. I tried to leave my PlayStation on. I come home from school, my dad would turn it off. I was trying to save
It's like
electricity.
it's like that God, was it an
What if your dad
advertisement
was
for a
actually-
memory card, and it was like
What if
try
your
and
dad
beat
was
Final
actually-
Fantasy VII without it. Like on the back of the memory card box, it said try to beat Final Fantasy VII without it, and you did. You tried.
I
What if your
tried.
dad was just starting a new game over your game every time?
I
and that's
mean,
why,
that-
like you thought he turned it off, but really he like beat the game while you were at school, and he'll never
That-
tell you. He's
that'd
like,
be
I have to let him dream.
That'd be way cooler than what was really going on. But no, so 7 was really good. I did really enjoy Final Fantasy 8, but Final Fantasy 9 felt more fantasy. 7 was more had Final Fantasy 9 reminded me
Steampunk,
of the
like-
more steampunk, and then 8 was like, LOL, we're going to school. Ha 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 ha. I was already doing that. I didn't want to go to school in my video games after going to school growing up as a kid. I still played 8 and I loved 8.
Yeah.
But Final Fantasy 9, you got to play as Monkey Boy, man. It was some cool stuff. You run around with your tail, and Vivi is my all-time greatest favorite Final Fantasy 9 character. This dude is running around understanding and learning who he is, and then understanding and learning the world around him. And that had
Yeah,
a
we're talking about mortality and stuff, and then there's VV.
and then Vivi be like, I don't know anything, man. What's all this going on? And it's just I love both of those games so much. But to keep with the theme with your favorite Final Fantasy, we'll focus on Final Fantasy 9 some more. The card game in Final Fantasy 9 could have been better. Let's be real.
It had a high
Final
standard
Fantasy-
to go against. That
But
paid.
Final 8 was really up there. It was top tier, but I did a playthrough on 9 where I would just do the card game Tetramaster and the random number generator of how the attacks and how all of how the game mechanics worked. It's very infuriating trying to collect all of that and winning the card tournament. But it's cool, man. I nerd out anytime Final Fantasy is brought up. As you can see, I've got all this Final Fantasy stuff behind me, and I could go on and on and on about any of these games. I love 7, I love 9, and in fact, I love 9 so much I didn't open this one.
Oh,
So-
nice.
So
Nice.
That's not.
Sealed
that
black
actually- that-
label
that-
Final Fantasy.
That's not even
9.
nice. That's like when people ask, like, "Hey, when do you say noise?" It's like, yeah, that's a noise.
Right there, noise.
That's noise. Noise. Like that's been saving that.
That's
gotta
a
keep one
sealed
loaded in the
Final
in the
Fantasy
barrel.
9. For,
I mean,
for,
it's-
for
it-
audio
cool thing.
listeners, sealed
That's-
Final Fantasy 9 black label.
That's right, man. It even has that little thing on the back where it hasn't been peeled up to hang from the shelf. It's
Right.
I just like
Good stuff.
imagine like there's a label on the back. It's like this shit's legit. Like, that's what it
This
is.
is
And also-
legit.
I'm not trying to deviate from what I was saying, but since to
Yeah.
fill up a little more time, let's just give a shout out to all of the artwork for the
Oh, yeah.
Japanese copies of the game. It just really just destroys the way that what we got in North America.
Yeah, like
and-
like Final
Good
Fantasy
point.
9 was so much like of an obvious like let's go back to the roots. You know what I mean? Like let's go back to what Final Fantasy was before. I would even say before 6. Like let's go back to that kind of stuff. And they obviously showed it. Like even like the Crystal Returns, I believe, is on the back of it, right? So yeah, I mean like that's awesome, man. Final Fantasy 9 was really good. I really like the story of it and everything. So cool, man.
the crystal comes
Yeah.
back.
What's funny is you mentioned how 9 and kind of what's the word I'm looking for as juxtaposed against 6. But what's so funny is like when I look at them and I think about them, it's like the steampunk elements and everything are so similar. It's almost like, hey, if you flip 9 around, it's 6. Like, oh my god. And if you think about them, like they're like 2 of the most progressive games in the series. Like 6, it's a female lead,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's like and Terra. I mean, no one can say Terra's not badass. And even if she's not like there's some things, you know, you can not like as far as a character strength and all that stuff, but it's like she is actually like so integral to the story that's beyond just her own story, like the actual world building. Like that's her whole point, is that she's like this cog in like the world building. It's great.
World building,
And then
yeah,
and then
that in
there's
itself.
Zidane, who and again talking about like progressive kind of ideological. Zidane's like this, and he's actually like androgynous. Like the whole concept is like he's androgynous, like basically like no gender. Like if you think in 2020, like people are just like, seriously, like everyone's in 2020, everyone's favorite like main character would probably be
It would
Zidane.
probably be Zidane. Yeah, that's
Yeah, but it's
really
like,
true
yeah, and you look at the world building and everything like that. I just see a lot of parallels with 9 and 6, and that's just, I just want
Yeah,
to mention.
okay, that's a fair point. Yeah.
Well, Osby, I just want to get this off my chest.
Yes,
I
Please
never
do.
beat Final Fantasy 9
that's okay.
because
No.
I mean, it's not okay, but it's okay.
11-year-old me thought it was a complete design flaw to have a party of like 8 or 9 people. You have a choice. You know, I picked my 3 favorite. And then, of course, the 2 people that I didn't even touch get paired up to do an end game boss. And I said, nope, I can't beat this boss. This ain't for me. And I never picked it up since. I own it on 3 different systems. And every time I go to start it, I just remember. And I'm like, that pisses me off so bad.
You need that
It's
full
like,
party grind.
I just
baby. You gotta
imagine
do
it's like,
all that full party.
Well,
I just imagine like your
11-year-old me
final
wasn't
party is like
grinding.
random, and it's like you just go into the final boss and all you have is Queena.
Yeah. Oh my god, dude.
Hey man, she'd be like eating stuff.
Hey, yo, she's eating stuff.
Sometimes it do be like that, dude. Like Final Fantasy 9 Master Chef, and it's just Queena.
Yeah, interesting you say that, Vinny, because I have beat Final Fantasy 9, but I as well, when I was, God, what did it come out? Did it come out in 2009? I think it was like 2009, because they were doing like every year. So I was 9 years old, and I was just kind of like, I made this. When did it come
Final
out?
Fantasy 10 came out in 2001, so I think 9 came out in 2000.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I was 10, and I mean, when I got to the end, I was just like you, Vinny. And I was so mad that like I was like, the only thing I can do is straight up like go out there and grind for hours. And I was like, well, or I can just replay the game and get the same, experience, but just now that I know what to do. But I didn't get around to it for like several years. I think it was in one of the lull between, I think it was the lull between 10 and 12. And I was just like, I'll go back and play 9 now. But yeah, like I was so mad. And that was like one of the memories I had with it that just stuck. And I'm just like, this game, man, but it's a really good game. And now it's on, it's on all the modern consoles with the 3 times speed. So
that is the way to go when grinding. Just be careful
definitely.
and don't accidentally max your stats by pressing the wrong button, because you can't.
Just while you're eating your bagel bites, just one hand bagel bite, one hand 3x controller hitting.
It is perfectly acceptable to do 3 times speed to get the full experience of Final Fantasy 9.
I was expecting you to say it's perfectly acceptable to eat bagel bites.
Like get real serious about the bagel bites real quick.
Yeah, we're not sponsored. We're not sponsored.
The unofficial
real
sponsorship
serious.
from Bagel Bites.
Yeah,
the only thing about Final Fantasy 9 that I
what's your favorite bagel bite? Like this
podcast has changed. What's your favorite bagel bite?
I'll tell you what my not favorite bagel bite is, and that's that 12-hour sword run for Steiner in Final Fantasy 9, because I totally tried it.
I hate that bagel bite.
Totally tried that bagel bite and just missed it, and almost threw my copy of Final Fantasy 9 away several years ago.
The most infuriating part of that whole game, and I won't disclose the things I did in frustration, was the hippo race in Final Fantasy 9. And I see, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, trust me, I have. When I go to talk, we'll talk about frustration. Don't worry.
We'll get there.
All right. Well, you know what? Let's go ahead and throw it.
I love Dark Souls, so I know frustration.
Oh my dude! I finally played Dark Souls, and I got like to like the 5th boss, and I was like, yeah, like this game makes me like want to like smash my head in, but it's like, but it's beautiful and this
But it-
music is great. And then it's like, and then like 10 minutes later, it's like, this music sucks. This game is stupid. I hate everything.
All right, let's throw it over to Vinny. Vinny, go ahead and give us your favorite Final Fantasy game, man.
All right, so my favorite, obviously 7. But probably like just a hairline behind 7. I'd say Final Fantasy X is probably my favorite.
Depending on the hairline.
Like mine receding. It's pretty far
Welcome
away.
to, well, this is 30.
Yeah, welcome to 30. Here it is.
I'm 2 years off from 30, so I got some time with my hairline. That's fine. I can appreciate 2 more
I
years.
just like imagine like a musical, just me and my hairline.
Ozzy, I need you to bring out the guitar. No, I'm just kidding.
No? Okay.
So Final Fantasy X was my favorite because it was the first Final Fantasy that I played that I knew was a Final Fantasy. I had a PS2, and it was one of the first games I got for my PS2. I first saw it at a friend's house. His dad was actually playing it. My first impression of Final Fantasy X was the first gatekeeper boss right before you fight Unalesca, right after Mount Gagazet. I grew up, I love dragons. I love that fantasy type stuff. And the first thing I see, I love swords and magic too. And the first thing I see about Final Fantasy is this gigantic dragon and a bunch of little ass people just beating on it with swords. And he's just shooting laser beams out of his like wingtips and I was like, man, this game is for me. This is absolutely, what is this? And
That's my fantasy too. Just a bunch of little people beating the shit out of
This
dragons.
is my fantasy too.
This is us.
Mom walks in. What are you watching? That's not what it looks like.
Go away, mom. I'm beating dragons.
Well, segueing into Final Fantasy VII, my friend came over watching me play Final Fantasy VII, and so I was fighting a bunch of goblins, and I used to think that the summons were so cool, so I used to like show them off to my friends. So I summoned Bahamut Zero, and my friend was just like, that was like 3 minutes long, and you know, he was like, could you imagine?
Now you're gonna watch it 4 more times. Like quad summon.
Quad summon.
You think that's bad? Get some Knights of the Round, baby.
Yeah, W summon on that. Yeah.
But so Final Fantasy X had a lasting impression on me. I rented it from, get this, Blockbuster, and played it. And so I can't remember Blockbuster's like policies because that's so archaic now. I don't remember if video games had like a time limit. I don't remember, but I remember beating it before I had to bring it back, which made the game more difficult for younger me because I think I ended up fighting Jecht at the end with like 6k HP on everybody, and I think Titus was hitting a max of like 2k. So yeah, the boss fights were difficult, but I felt like I had a time limit. But when I like finally went back and actually like played it when I was older and I could appreciate it more, I got the PAL version so I can get all the Dark Aeons and pendants. Because when the Googles came out and I started looking up stuff about Final Fantasy, I kept seeing all this stuff about Dark Aeons, and I couldn't find it in my game. And I found out that there was an international version of Final Fantasy, and I said I have to have that. So I got that, and Final Fantasy X has to be my favorite probably because the story is, I think, very well written. It's confusing and very convoluted, but once it clicks, it clicks. And I thought all those like aha moments when you start realizing things really came together nicely. And the game wasn't over when it was over like it was for previous Final Fantasies, because you had all these hidden locations, which it felt more of an open world. Now, I get that Final Fantasy X is probably one of the most like hallway driven, very linear, with the illusion of an open world. But I think those extra places that you can go, like Omega Ruins, really brought out the fact that they took away the open world, but still made it feel like Final Fantasy VII's open world was amazing. And Final Fantasy X, I feel like did a decent job at making you feel like you didn't lose that aspect of the series. But then you had the super bosses. They actually felt like super bosses. And it was a grind if you wanted to fight Penance or any of the Dark Aeons. You were in that monster arena for probably 90% of the game. But yeah, I say Final Fantasy X is definitely up there on my list. And then, you know, of course, there was that golden laughing scene that I don't think any Final Fantasy will ever top how cheesy it is.
Speaking of Final Fantasy X and its convoluted story, I mean, it's the same story writer as 7, and the compilation of 7, Nojima.
The irony.
I couldn't say
Just
his first
imagine
name.
him,
I'm
like,
going
the
to try and
writer
say his
being
first
like-
name. Isn't it like Kazuguchi or Kazuhushki? Kazuguchi? No, Nojima?
Don't
I know
worry,
his
we'll
last
fix it
name.
in post edit.
Sure. We'll go with that. Sure.
So Nojima is the writer of 10, and obviously there's some Easter eggs where like they're tied into each other, not fully confirmed yet, but kind of, where 10 and 7 are kind of a shared universe or shared world, which is really cool. But as far as Final Fantasy X goes with the difficulty, I also wanted to comment on there too. I got stuck at Sin when you're fighting Sin on the airship. And I got like stuck there. I had to grind. I had to go back to like the best place you could grind at the time, and just for hours until I could beat that guy.
My
The
first
the
time.
sin spawn on the beach was like that was a grind. That was a great boss fight because
That-
like
Mhm.
That was my wall. The Sin Spawn GUI on the beach when you have to fight him twice and you get Seymour in your party.
Mhm.
Yep.
That was definitely like I said, that first time going through the game, I kind of rushed through it. I got stuck on that boss for a little while, and there were moments in the game like when you fight Seymour for the first time in Macalania. Oh, by the way, I love the little Easter egg that they have when Titus says Macarena Temple, and then somebody says something, and then he says the I part from the actual song.
I wonder if that's US only though. I don't know.
It would
I'm
have to
just
probably
wondering.
be US only because I'm not sure if other countries would.
Wait,
Really...
is the Macarena canon in Final Fantasy lore? These are the questions. This is investigative journalism.
That's where the greeting came from, the Macarena. They were like,
Yeah,
I mean,
hey, Macarena.
What if it's like what if that's like
There's-
actually how Hawaiians send people to the far plains? You can just do it the Macarena.
Hey,
Just-
Macarena.
We need to cut a music video of like Unit just sending off people to the Macarena.
To the
Oh,
Macarena.
yes.
That's
Like when she's
premium
like
content.
dancing in the
This-
water
this-
with the
Yeah.
just like
Now
have
these
that
are the
playing in the
this is how we
background.
get this is how we get Barrett on.
Hey, that's right.
This is
That's
how we
right.
get Barrett.
this is how we get you done. I hope you're still
He
watching.
comes to the personality, but stays to the Macarena.
You, you
We
mentioned
gotta
wall.
hey Margarita. Like,
Oh my god!
Please do. That needs to happen. You mentioned wall bosses in Final Fantasy X. What was the boss? I think it's after you fight Unaliska, and you get on the airship, and you're stuck on the airship, and then the big dragon dude flies down.
Oh, that's Evray. That's
Yes.
way before
Oh,
that.
Evray.
Evray. That boss made me restart the game.
Oh,
The first
wow.
time, I didn't grind enough, and I just could not beat that boss. My first run in 10, I literally got Yuna's, is it the overdrive? Yuna's overdrive up, and I would just spam summon specials.
Also, can
And
we
just
talk
summon-
about how
Wow.
great the sphere grid is? If we're talking about grinding,
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. Sphere Grid was
Like, so
awesome.
good.
I love the battle system too. Like 10 was like you were saying, Vinny, you said that, it might have been linear, right? Like it was a very linear experience in a sense. But I guess if you're going to compare it to Final Fantasy 13, because that's like infamous for its linearity. If you compare it to that, it's just like 10 had that sense of discovery and sense of wonder, whereas 13 really did not. And like with 10, every village you went to felt alive and different, and like and like culturally different, I guess, too, if you want to throw that in. It had this sense of wonder to it, whereas 13 just kind of failed to do that. And then also when you start talking about battle systems and sphere grid, the amazing story, yeah, it 10 justifies itself. And linearity is not always a bad thing. Like I sometimes I prefer a more linear approach than an open world approach, just because I get tired of the same open world concepts that are in every game.
When it's too open world, you fall into that Final Fantasy V trap where it's like, all right, you got to talk to this person.
Let's not
If you
talk
miss-
bad about Final Fantasy V.
you go too far north, you got to go north. All right, I'm going
Mhm.
north. Well, I missed the little 16-bit village I was supposed to hit, and I'm still going north, and holy crap, these things are one-shotting me now. So
Mhm.
it's like
Oh,
too open
we-
world,
we-
and it's kind of bad. And then too linear, you get Final Fantasy 13 where they literally, there's no grind to it. They block you.
Mhm.
You're
They
just
boss
walking a
block
straight.
you.
You're walking a straight line for 13 hours.
And
Dude, that's
then
what I
it opens
love.
up that whole big world, and you're like, "Hey, this is the Final Fantasy I wanted." And then
Yeah.
that's all you got.
That's
you know?
that's it, right?
So
That's why 7's pacing was so freaking good. I mean, obviously, some of the Final Fantasy before had the same approach, whereas like you get out into this open world, right? You see this open world, but you can't pass this mountain. You know what I mean? Like you can't. They have like little blocks that prevent you from going places you're not supposed to, but it is still open. Like you got these open.
Hard to believe that even before 2020, we still had gatekeeping.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So you had
Ironic.
you had gatekeeping in Final Fantasy, and it prevented you from going to certain places. But once you have gotten there, you can easily traverse back because it opened up like the Tiny Bronco where you can go through rivers, then so on, the dune buggy and stuff like that. Whereas like you feel like you're progressing through this world, and then at the end of Final Fantasy VII, there's still a lot to do where you can take the high wind and just go over the entire world.
Dim golden chocobos.
Get them golden chocobos, get Knights of the Round, Bahamut Zero. I'm sorry. You probably have already gotten that by that by that point. But still, there's a lot to do. And I think that's kind of, and we'll get into this in another episode because I'm really excited to talk about what we want in part 2 of Remake. Yeah, that's definitely going to be for another podcast. But yeah, or another episode of this podcast. But yeah, so thank you for sharing that, Vinny. Now,
hold on. I have to elaborate a little tiny bit on what I said before about the frustration. This will be,
Oh yeah,
sweet
yeah.
and simple. But nothing was more infuriating than trying to get 0 seconds on a chocobo race and also trying to dodge 200 lightning bolts all in the same playthrough just to max out somebody's ultimate weapon. I
the
mean,
lightning field, man.
I
Oh.
think I broke 2 controllers on that chocobo race, and I said very insulting things, something an 11-year-old probably shouldn't be saying, talking about that chocobo rider when she was cutting you off, stealing your balloons, pushing you into seagulls. That was
What? Man, I hate when people steal my balloons and push me into seagulls.
bro.
That's the worst. How could this day get any
Those
worse?
gosh darn seagulls.
Yeah, that's my
Oh, these
theory.
heckin' seagulls.
These
man.
heckin'
What?
seagulls. Yo,
These damn beach trash birds.
Trash birds.
Oh,
my God.
man.
Hey,
Yeah.
hey, let's not forget this exists too, right?
Final Fantasy,
10 too. And then there was that novel, the novella. Don't get me started on that.
No, well, you know.
Another
I-
time.
Yeah, that because 10-2 and I mean I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong. I just felt like I have some issues with this. But anyways, so we go over to Reed Daniels. What's up, man? I love your last name. It's like to me.
It's I'm a Marvel character.
I'm a
Yeah, you'll see me in next.
no Reed.
Yeah, I'm the guy who gets coffee for Captain America.
Read it.
I'm the real hero.
You're coming at us live from the edge of a cliff, am I right?
Yeah, and I've been standing here for a while, and that cactus has not moved yet.
Up there
But
grinding
Cactar.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, but I got some suspicions. Like I know he's just waiting for me to look away.
Yeah, don't move.
And it
Don't
seems
you
like
stand-
Reed
stand
took
still.
too much peyote out there, apparently.
And that's not a picture.
10,000 needles,
That's me
baby.
right now. That's me in real time. What I'm doing.
Yeah, make
So-
sure you remain still. You don't want to scare it off.
Yeah, I am. Wow, never mind. I was about to say I'm incredibly stiff. That's why my shadow isn't moving, and I thought twice about that, and I still said it.
Being-
So you're
I
welcome.
still
Talking
said-
about
I
Final
thought
Fantasy,
twice
but
about it, and then I said
so
it.
Being
support
incredibly stiff.
Patreon. You know,
More
I
information
thought
on his
twice about it,
stiffness.
and then I still said it.
it's too good not to.
All right,
share.
Reed. What's
yeah,
up, man?
favorite Final Fantasy. So I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and say what everyone's thinking. I hate Final Fantasy 7 is probably the best. The story, everything. Like 8 years old, my 8th birthday party, I got Final Fantasy 7, and every time, I had an older brother, and much like yourself, and imagine if they were friends. And growing up, it's just every time we would have a fight, because he's bigger and stronger than me, I'd just be like, hey, whoa, hold on. Well, you could beat me up, or I could give you 5% ownership of Final Fantasy 7. He's like, 5%? Like, all right, in this
5%?
economy? Like, all right, yeah, like, done. And we had like a piece of paper that tracked how much of Final Fantasy 7 each of us owned. like who knew that we like it was like it was pretty much like the beta like for Shark Tank.
It's like, all right, bro, you got to Midgar, you got out of Midgar, you're done. That's your 5% share. You're
yeah,
done.
they, but outside of that, I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and say that 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all my favorites. I mean, 4. Actually, and I'm going to go ahead and throw a shout out to a terrible game that I love with all my heart, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest.
Thank
Anyone
you.
anyone who ever wants to
Thank you.
ever wants to get into Final Fantasy, just play that game. It's just talking about linear. It's just it's like the most simple like version,
Well,
ideal of Final Fantasy set, like Final Fantasy in general. Huh?
correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Mystic Quest Japan's a North American version of Final Fantasy because they thought we weren't going to be intelligent enough to actually
It's Final
play
Fantasy America.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where's the lie? like that's there's
I think
Like-
you're right.
yeah, I can't do nearly a decent enough Japanese impression to insult the American intelligence from their perspective. Suffice to say,
You
it
would just be
happened
doing it just
behind closed doors. Yeah, it happened behind closed doors. And let me tell you, like you're hearing it in your head now in a much better voice than I could ever do, because I'm a respectable adult, and I turn my toaster sideways so I can make grilled cheese. I'm an adult, damn it. But if like honestly, like for the whole idea and the great debate that we can dedicate a whole show to whether his name is Cecil or Cecil.
The master debate.
Yeah.
Yes, the
Well-
master.
Everyone's gonna get in on this, so it's gonna be a mass debate. And then it's gonna be me against the world. So I will, you know what? I don't care. I'll be the masturbate. Okay, like I'll do it. Okay, I'll do it live in front of all of you. Oh God.
The Zoom can handle that many people, so let's
right,
go.
right. Yeah. No, I'm not Jeffrey Tubin.
Oh god.
That's why I keep my.
That's why your
off.
video's off right now.
Yeah, right. I'm not telling you what I'm doing on the edge of that cliff. So the whole story of Cecil, Rydia, like, oh man, Final Fantasy IV is just such a good story. Fantastic. And then honestly, I mean, I think Final Fantasy VI, if there's a real contender with Final Fantasy VII for like just in general, like the actual best game in the series, it's probably Final Fantasy VI. Like, and we were talking earlier about how Terra, broke norms as a main character and everything. Like, it's just in the cast, just like what 12.
The cast
Or,
is
11?
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah,
And like
I
each
just remember
character
as a-
matters.
yeah.
Is
As a
that-
kid, I loved Gal so much, and he was like the most useless, but he was a blue mage. I love how they all had like actual classes and everything like that, and they still do. That's one beautiful thing about Final Fantasy.
That opening scene though, Magic
dude.
Armors walking through the snow.
So it's so good. It's
Can
The
you
North
imagine-
American version getting the number wrong.
I just think it's funny that everyone's always like everyone's like, oh my god, the opera scene gives me chills, which it is good. But
It's
then
good.
like you watch it and it's just like someone like 30 feet away from a microphone like blowing a whistle. Like that's for like 8 minutes straight. Like that's what it is. Just like, oh my god, I've never seen
Oh
something
my-
this.
It's like
I've-
your
oh my
imagination is too
God.
good.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's so good. But my
You hit that high
personal
note.
in
If you-
terms of fun, I'm gonna go at obviously 7's taken. So let's give credit where credit's due. I'm gonna go ahead and say Final Fantasy 5. God knows I love that game. There's never been a better class system. Like in all of Final Fantasy, I don't think there's ever been a better class system where it's like they integrate the crystals and the crystals unlock all the job classes and everything. Like it's just the best progression. Yes.
Yeah.
And man, buying Anthology was like one of the best things I ever did. It's so everyone go out and buy it.
Yeah.
Go to your local Walmart.
Dim load times,
It's on the
though.
shelf. It's on the shelf.
Go buy the
Trust
PS1 game.
me. Yeah, just tell them Reed sent you. They'll know what I'm talking about. No, it's and then I just think when I think of Final Fantasy, like as a kid, I just remember like that, like the sprites, you know, like the battle system where you're so small and the bad guys are always so big. And I just think of God, one of just the most memorable things is Galuf, when he's fighting Exdeath and he casts Meteor, like he sacrifices himself and everything. It's just like it's an iconic thing where you look at it now, it's like you're just like, man, that took 6 minutes to make. And there's like a guy, like a producer in the room's like, hey, I worked really hard on that for 6 minutes, like, you know. But it's like as a kid, you look at this and you're like, is this the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life? Like,
Yeah.
it's like it's fantastic. It's the best, in my opinion, still the best job system that's ever existed in Final Fantasy, and it is a truly fantastic game. And also, extra shout out to Final Fantasy 3. But
Oh,
there we
okay.
go.
So like going off of that death scene in Final Fantasy 5, like I'm one of them, so I'm assuming, like I'm speaking for people who played 7 first, like that was their first Final Fantasy. And you know, Aerith's death obviously was like, oh my god, right? That was the first time you witnessed kind of something like that in a video game, you know? And and I think that if you played the original Final Fantasies before 7, when you get that death scene in 5, like that is iconic in itself. And I think it just gets overshadowed a lot. I mean, I'm not like saying that it's better because I don't think so, but like Aerith's death is still the most
Yeah,
iconic.
I mean,
But like,
I mean, well,
but
you
that death
can't.
scene, and then
There's
in
only so
6
much you
too.
can do with like a sprite, like where he's like, oh, he's standing vertically. Oh, he's laying horizontally. He's dead.
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
Like as opposed to like watching a sword go through someone's abdomen. Like, it's like, oh well, this shit got real. Like, okay, like Jesus.
Like that's the thing. Like when you look at 6 and 7, and that's a debate between a lot of people. Like what is the better Final Fantasy? And if you ask a bunch of people, yeah, you'll get your 10s thrown in there. You'll get, you know, like random numbers thrown in there. But mostly, I bet in a poll it would be 7 and 6, like neck and neck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like 6 was. I mean, I think that game is due for like a remake treatment.
Yes,
and not,
I agree 100%.
If 6 was
Yeah.
in 3D, it may have been
Yeah.
better than 7.
That's because like the open world
Yeah.
and everything. And also,
I'm
let me
not- I
also
don't know.
just say this: like Final Fantasy 6, it's like you expect. Okay, well, Kefka's the bad guy. Like this guy's nuts. You know, it's
Oh my
like,
god, yeah.
it's literally just Heath Ledger as a sprite, like Heath Ledger's Joker as a sprite. But it's
Yeah.
like just what's so amazing about that game, and I think it's what's really cool to think about is halfway through Final Fantasy 6, the bad guy wins.
The bad
and
guy
the rest,
does
and
what
the rest,
he says he's
so-
going
so-
to do. I
so
love that.
So what's really cool is imagine if Final Fantasy 7, you know, what if Final Fantasy 7 was like 6 discs, and at the end of 3, he called like Sephiroth
Meteor.
calls Meteor,
Yeah.
and then there's a whole second half of the game where the team's actually living in the wake of Meteor being called, because that's Final Fantasy 6.
That's 6.
Final Fantasy 6.
Yeah, I love that about 6. Like I love stories where the villain does what he says he's going to do, like Avengers Infinity War.
Yeah.
Right.
He does what he's gonna do. He's like, I'm gonna push over that cow. Here we go. Like,
Yeah,
it's just-
yeah. I'm going to
move
throw you
like
in a
this.
flock of seagulls.
Oh no! my flock. My favorite. That was my favorite seagull.
so, so yeah, I mean, like when the villain does what he sets out to do, it's like that's awesome. And I think if you had 6, like you said, man, if you remake 6, Square Enix, I'm talking to you,
Sign me up.
do it
Yeah.
right. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that Final Fantasy 7 remake was wrong, but I'm saying, like, if you're gonna make a Final Fantasy 6 remake, tell the story that you told in the original, because obviously a lot of people have enjoyed Final Fantasy 7, and I get what they were doing. I get what they're doing with Final Fantasy 7 remake, but with Final Fantasy 6 remake it like exactly the way the story was meant to be told.
So
With
and
Final
this
Fantasy
might
7's
be-
combat
this might be
remakes.
this might be a conversation for another show, but
Exactly.
I mean, but man, just as far as explaining what I think is happening in 7 remake, I can go on and on. I really, if you look at the end of Final Fantasy 7 and then the beginning of Final Fantasy 7 remake, I think that they're two dots that actually connect. Like
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's like it's basically James Gunn's Suicide Squad where it's like don't call the comeback. Like it is kind of like a soft sequel kind of thing.
It's like that infinite loop that's starting
So-
back over, but they're self-aware this time
it is
around.
Right. So well,
definitely-
Aerith is.
Well, like, make no mistake, Final Fantasy 7 remake is a continuation of the compilation of Final Fantasy 7. It's not a remake, and I think
But that's why I think they call it remake, is because they get through. They establish the fact that going forward it's going to be different because it's the same, and you're just like, oh, what are these specters and everything like that? Because at first I was not sold on them at all,
right.
and then towards the end I started putting it together. It's like, okay, so they're just setting up where it's going to be different. So that's why I think that Chapter 1 is called Final Fantasy 7 Remake, because that is where everything that we think about the game
is remade.
is,
I get that.
where it changes going forward. And
So,
also,
okay,
yeah.
I kind of just want to throw this in there real quick because I don't want to because this is obviously, like you said, this is another podcast.
Right.
But for Final Fantasy 7 remake, I do want to get my thoughts out there, because this is an introduction show. So let me get my thoughts out for you guys right now. So going forward, you know what to expect from me. Final Fantasy 7 remake put me through all the stages of grief. Right, I went through like just hatred. I don't even know, like denial. But I'm ready to admit that I am at acceptance. I have gotten to acceptance, and now I add another stage to it where I am hyped for part
Yeah.
2. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
what really happened to me personally is I felt personally betrayed by Square Enix. And now I'm not like, I love Final Fantasy 7 remake. Let me get that disclosure or disclaimer right now. I think it might be my game of the year, and it's a toss up between Last of Us Part 2 remake, Final Fantasy 7 remake. It might be my game of the year. I love that game. I absolutely adore it. But I think what made me so upset after I beat the game was I was like, they lied to me. They told me that I was getting a remake of Final Fantasy 7. They lied to me. Like going into the game, they told, like, okay, let's go back to 2015 when they announced it. The promise has been fulfilled or made, all right? Which means there was an outcry from fans, remake this game, right? We want to play it in modern day. Game, I'm not talking about a remaster. That's another debate as well. Remakes and remaster are two totally different things. And yes, a remake of what I'm talking about is a remake. So same combat system that they went with. I loved it. I loved the open world. I loved the 3D environments and stuff. But that was the remake I wanted. That was the remake I was promised. And I got something totally different. I got a continuation of the compilation. So I think that's where I stand on it, or I stood on it. I still do, because I really would have just loved to play the game that I grew up loving, the story I grew up attached to, in a 3D modern day gameplay. But that will never happen. I have to come to grips with that. They're not going to say, okay, now we're gonna remake 7 the way
Yeah.
you wanted it.
We've had this
Um,
in the tank the whole time.
Yeah,
You-
right.
like, oops, who put that on the
There you
internet?
go.
Yeah, like-
Here's the DLC where you can play the original story.
So Danny
Um,
beats the game and he's sitting there looking down and he's like, I need an adult.
Oh my god, no, I was so mad, dude. I'm not even gonna lie. I had a YouTube video up for a long time where I was just going
he had
off.
to take it down.
I
due to
took it down
vulgarity.
because I was like, I don't feel that way anymore. So, but I felt that way when I first beat it. Like I was mad.
so
But now I'm excited for part 2. I'm really hyped. Like I can't I can't wait.
remember when you beat the game, you texted me and you said, let me know when you finish it.
Yeah, I was
And
so
my 2 words were we'll say I said holy crap. And
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
like
yeah.
crap, holy crap indeed. Crap indeed. And then there's just like, this book of this reply.
it's yeah.
It was like it was in all caps.
I was ready.
I
I was
just
ready at the
imagine-
keyboard for you to say you beat it.
You say it's a whole book, but I just imagine it's like literally just 800 consecutive poop emojis. Like, no, dude, like I like so I actually kind of got exactly what I wanted out of 7 Remake, where it's like so the idea is like if you live your like think about it this way, if you live your same life as it has been and you make a single decision that's different or anything like that, you know, it's butterfly effect starring Ashton Kutcher. But it's like things would happen a little. It would kind of branch off in like very subtle kind of ways. And the idea is, it's almost like the live stream, like the whole concept of fate, where it's like it's like, oh, that's stupid. Fate can't be like personified. It's like, have you seen the live stream? That's like it's so, but like.
Yeah.
And again, we can do a whole podcast about this, but I legitimately believe that the end of Final Fantasy VII leads directly into 7 Remake, where Aerith is in the live stream. So you look at the end of 7, where it's like the live stream going off, and then again, the very first shot of 7 Remake, like the original, is it's from a first person like point of view. And it goes directly into Aerith. So I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and throw the theory out there that Aerith, as a part of the live stream, it's from her perspective, and she goes into her body from the beginning of Final Fantasy VII, and she relives that whole thing. Because if you look at the whole game in context, it's like, you know, obviously she's acting pretty sketchy, and Sephiroth did the same thing because he's also part ancient. That's why at the end she's like, everything about you is wrong because that this isn't how it's supposed to happen, kind of thing.
Sephiroth be like, join me. And you'd be like, nah.
But what's
what
crazy?
you talking about? No, man.
What's crazy is like there's a scene where you're at her house and she's like, when she's like talking to the flowers, and Cloud's like, is everything, or is you know, are you doing everything, or I can't remember the way it's said, but she's like, there's only one thing I have to do, something like that. And you know, it's like, wow, dude, she's going to such lengths just to make sure that she gets killed by Sephiroth, because that's what has to happen.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, how else could she join the live stream and alert and make herself aware of what's happening? So it's like, in that context, I'm just like, I love it. And also the fact, and Zack is one of my all-time favorite video game characters, like in general. So like the idea that the end is him on that cliff, and he just sees like it's like he literally watches like the concept of fate broken over Midgar, and you just see him walk away. So it's like he might actually live. Like it just like, I don't know, man. I love it. Is the remake we wanted? No, but
right.
I appreciate.
I knew there was some shady things happening when Aerith was like, yeah, you can't fall in love with me. And I'm like,
right.
hold on, time out.
Tell me I won't, stupid.
What a scene.
Time out. I was like, wait a minute. There's some shady stuff going on here.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, Cloud's never been more in love with anyone. He's like, oh my god.
Do I not have a choice? I thought that was an excellent scene. Like one of the standout scenes from
when lovers are reunited with the yellow flower.
Yeah, I still think Tifa and Cloud are the
yeah, that's canon. I'm willing to ship that off into the sun.
I think Aerith fell in love with Cloud, but we get into that later. But anyways,
absolutely, but that's the whole idea is like it's about his personal growth. Because think about it this way, he lives the whole time he's with Aerith, he's living his life as Zack.
Mm-hmm.
So of course that's going to happen. He reminds her of him, and she, you know, it is exactly it, you know. And then once that's broken, he becomes his own person. If he met Aerith after that, would it happen? Would everything completely change? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. All right. So let's
It's like the steady, constant.
let's save that. That's some great content for another episode.
There we
I
go,
don't. I
there we
want to stick with the favorite Final
Spoilers.
Fantasies. Yeah, spoilers for or preview. For
Yeah,
for
preview.
future content. I guess my final thoughts on the remake. I do want to get that out there before we move on. Final thoughts on the remake thing. Yes, Reed said it. It wasn't the remake we wanted, but now I'm excited. The only thing that I hope that they do not forget, or I mean, I know it's the same story writer. I'm sure he's got this vision, but like, don't forget that the theme of Final Fantasy VII is life and death. If characters don't die, like if Zack, he died in the original, he's back. Aerith died in the, she's coming back. Like, their death has to be final. It has to be finite. It has to be, you know what I mean? Like, that's what the impact of 7 is. But the fact that like, oh, they can just come back, then it just becomes a DC Comics book. You know what I mean? Then it's just like, this is not the Final Fantasy 7 that they're losing the focus.
But that's like the whole concept of fate is like how, you know, little things. But again, butterfly effect starring Ashton Kutcher. But also let's go ahead and do this. We gotta do the shameless plug before we move on. And I'm gonna do it on your behalf. Let's go ahead and say how fantastic the casting is in Final Fantasy VII Remake. And John, if you're listening, great job, buddy. Great job. In fact,
Yes.
if I had to think of what Barrett would sound like, that's why I would think Barrett would sound like. And there's like, what's great is the best part of that whole game for me is there's when you're the Sector 5 plates, you know, like you're doing the whole maze to shut down, you know, and when there's a part where you find a summon, I think it's Chocomog, but it's like as you get closer to the room, he's like, "Oh, we're going on an adventure to find some treasure." I was like, "Oh my god!" Like I just want to hear like soft jazz. Like, I just want to hear.
Yeah, I like how he does the
Soft jazz by John Eric Bentley. That's what we need. John, if you're listening, I can't play drums, but I'll play drums for you. You
I
know,
can
like-
play drums.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, you got me and Vinny, so I can
Who would have
harmonize
thought
with this.
like I mean, obviously excellent voice casting all the way throughout, and I'm not just saying this because I've been in contact with you, John. But
I'm also in love with.
but who would have thought
Just
that,
saying.
that Barrett
Brianna White is.
was the heart like of remake? Like, he was the one that was bringing such like emotional or emotion to the game. I you know, who would have thought that? Obviously, you know, Brianna White did an amazing job as Aerith, and like she
Have you seen her
definitely brought-
cosplay as Aerith?
I did, yeah.
It was like oh my god, like I'm just like I look at that, I'm just like, well, I know who I'm gonna marry in my dreams. Like
One of the best things I've seen all year is watching her do the playthrough of 7
yeah,
and
that's really
remake,
great.
and then seeing some of the certain
so
scenes.
wholesome.
It's pretty
which
cool.
she did
we're
with John Eric
we were
Bentley,
going through
like
the slums.
with Barrett.
Yeah, we were going through the slums with her playthrough. when
Oh,
they're
I'm
going
sorry,
through
the original
slums,
games.
and she like slips off the ladder in the game, and she's like, "Ah, shit!" You know?
Right, yeah.
Her playthrough of that, it's like, oh my god, it's
Oh,
so
and we
fun.
can get into that too, because that's already kind of like character development that's already happened.
Bob-
But anyway,
This is
I'm-
yeah, exactly. Moving on because this is
moving
character
on.
development for the podcast.
So much thing. This is turning into a Final Fantasy 7 podcast. But obviously, when you say favorite Final Fantasy, that's what you're gonna get. But yeah, so Vinny, I'm sorry, man, I haven't heard from you in a while. You still there, bro?
Yeah, no, I'm still here.
He is a sword, so
He's a sword. He's too busy slaying beasts.
right.
I guess
What
my-
sword is that from 10?
my biggest thing about Final Fantasy remake, I'm really hoping that Red 13 is a playable character.
Oh, 100%.
Oh, I mean,
100%.
That was what I was most upset about with the remake was that
Actually,
He was a
that's a-
playable
that's a-
character in the early build, so I think that they're going to. I mean,
Well,
they already got it planned out. I think it just wasn't fleshed out enough for the remake.
if I remember correctly, you had no he was autonomous, right? You had no control over his actions.
yeah,
Right.
in 7 remake, but
I mean, you
they're
could tell him
they're
to run on
working
a
into
wall,
that.
but
Dude, Cosmo Canyon in the second one, I like that will be.
okay. Say
I
no
just want
more.
to see
Say
the
no
whole
more.
scene with Red's dad.
Say no
um,
more. Let's
yeah,
save that.
exactly.
Let's save that for what we want to see in part.
They
2.
know more. Huh?
Oh,
Oh my god!
that was a good one. I'm not even gonna lie. All right, guys. So that
You can visit
was-
us on Patreon whenever we set it up.
yeah. Support us on Patreon. You know, we'll probably be posting pre-show stuff. But anyways, guys, that was our favorite Final Fantasies. I believe that is a good place to end this podcast. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody here right now for joining me for the first ever Final podcast. And I mean, I had a great time. And I hope that the viewer, the listener, has also had a great time. Please comment below. Tell us your favorite Final Fantasy, and we'll respond to you. We'll be keeping an eye out for those comments. Of course, you can. Yeah, we'll be.
Guys, like on a scale from 1 to 10, guys, comment how nasally my voice sounds. Come on, let's really lay into it here.
Dude, you're catching a cold out there on that cliff, man.
Hey, man.
I
just
in this economy, like exposed to the elements.
Next time on Final Podcast, I do want to see you guys, your lovely faces, and I'm sure the audience would love to see your faces as well. So hopefully we'll have some video for you guys.
Yeah, I'm gonna work on getting my camera fixed, but
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah,
My camera works just fine. It's I'm an empath, you know. I feel for people, and I can't expose them to these things. But we'll work on that.
we'll get you on here, man. We want to see your face.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for joining me for this. This has been Final Podcast. We'll be doing this weekly. So see you next time. Please enjoy.